I'm Paul,
I'm Owen.
and we're Broken Bullish.
Join us for this week's crypto conversation.
Owen, how's it going?
Going well, Paul. Good to be back. How are you?
Good. It feels like we were just here last week.
It does. Spooky.
Spooky. It's been a whole 7 days and it's just flown by.
Yeah, it has. It's been my first week back to work after 8 weeks off. So that was, always tough when you come back to work after a bit of a break just to get up to speed again fast. So,
That's right. First week back in the saddle for you. But it's been, how have you found it? Like getting back to a bit of a working rhythm? Has it been just straight off and running, or has it been a bit slow and groggy?
Yeah, a little bit slow and groggy. I feel like the market might be slowing down a little bit, which is something never meant to say as a recruiter, I think. But I feel like there's a little bit more anxiety there. And I think that's natural with what's going on right now. But,
Well, like, keep in mind we're also into September now, well and truly, and is it like recruiting seems to be a bit of a seasonal business? Do you agree?
it does have a cyclical nature, but demand is usually pretty steady.
Okay.
So like Christmas is quiet, January, you're slowly rebuilding, but typically the year, goes in cycles towards the end of quarters for us, but in general, steady demand kind of throughout the most of the year.
Yeah. And so, like, what do you feel like is the catalyst for that? What is did many people talk about reasons for that, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess you could say, like, sometimes people go into the Christmas period, the holidays, they don't want to think about work, changing careers, they might be waiting for bonuses. Things like that would definitely impact the decision making. But yeah, in general, I feel like it's just when the opportunities come up and when businesses are ready to hire, they move quickly.
Because it's actually interesting that you say like the market seems to be cooling a little bit, because we keep hearing that there's such a tight, labour market. How do you feel like that is more inflationary pressure, interest rate pressure?
Well, firstly, I suppose if I was to equate where the recruitment market is now to the Bitcoin price, I'd say we're probably at, still near all-time highs.
Okay, cool.
So it's slowing down in context to that, but I've been doing the job in this city for 5 years. It's as high as it's ever been.
Right, okay. So it's like, I guess like a lot of people do a bit of a doomsday sort of statement, is that like, oh, it's cooling, but it's still pretty high from where it could be. Like, so... Yeah. All right, cool. So for context, things are good. They're just not peaking at all-time high again. We've peaked at all-time high, but it's still very high. That's basically the take.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's fair.
Cool. And clients happy to have you back on board?
Delighted.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Have you been doing a lot of coffees and lunches and all that sort of stuff?
No, mainly virtual.
Virtual?
Yeah.
Right.
So I feel like virtual has changed our whole industry.
Yeah.
Previously, like before COVID, I would have been out every day, kind of multiple meetings, different cafes, different parts of the city. We lost a lot of time in the commute, which was interesting. So I feel like our business has in part benefited from just getting working hours back.
Yeah.
By going virtual.
Yeah. Awesome.
How's your week been?
It's been interesting. A few client meetings. It's like you reflect on it and it's like you come to Saturday morning, like we do these things all the time, and it's just like, well, where did that time go? And it's like, a lot of client outreach right now. Same narrative, I think, as ever in a bear market. You have to stay in contact with your clients. Like, they want to be hearing a bit of your take on what is happening with the market. Right now, what is happening with the market is Ethereum merge is occurring. It's about to start going. I believe it's got a bit of a time window from the 10th of September through to the 19th is when it's set to take place. But it's been interesting to see what the market is doing. Like, Bitcoin just reclaimed $20,000 mark, but Ethereum has been moving independently of what the Bitcoin price has been doing, which hasn't really been a narrative or a feature for a long time. So it's interesting to observe this Ethereum merge and what impact it's going to have, and a lot of clients are excited on it. Some are betting against it, some are betting for it, and just a bit of a wait and see.
Yeah. So the expected completion date at the moment is,
I believe it's the 19th of September. I could be wrong, but from my reading and understanding, it could happen at any time in between there. So Ethereum merge is a very interesting concept. They're effectively trying to engine swap a moving beast as it's going into something more better.
Yeah.
But it is going to be, as a punter and someone on the sidelines, it's something that we're witnessing a bit of history here, I think.
Yeah, it's very topical, I think, so if I understand it correctly, the reason that this is such an appealing investment for institutional investment funds under the new proof of stake structure will be that it's a greener product.
Effectively. So just a bit of background, and I don't want this podcast session to turn into what is the Ethereum merge. It's probably being done to death everywhere right now.
Yeah.
But for those that don't know, the consensus mechanism is the mechanism that a blockchain chooses to validate transactions. Currently, Ethereum is proof of work, which is very energy intensive. And for the layman at home or person that doesn't understand computing, so people like myself, but what that means is that the type of equation that a computer has to solve to validate an Ethereum transaction is very complex and significant. Whilst under proof of stake, because you're asking the computers that are validating these transactions to have some buy-in, which is 32 Ethereum, to validate a transaction, you can make that equation less complex that a computer has to solve, and you can protect yourself from downside risk by having that Ethereum staked on the network, so that if there is a mistake from that computer, you take the Ethereum. So the way in which you can basically prevent the downside risk and give your network further security is by making the equation very difficult to solve, so that you have a surety that it is correct each and every time, or B, make it less complex to solve but take a financial protection, so the 32 Ethereum, so that it provides an incentive to get it right every time. But that's basically the theory, so the two goalposts.
So proof of stake, somebody has to stake their Ethereum, their 32 ETH.
Correct.
And then as they approve transactions on the network,
they
either get Ethereum back from the network as a reward for doing that,
and if they make an error, they lose some of their Ethereum. And because of that mechanism, basically the transaction is easier to solve and the equation is easier to solve, therefore it requires less power to run the network. That's basically a very short and simple and easy to understand explanation. Hopefully you guys agree too. But so that's a bit of the narrative right now. A lot of people are looking towards that, as well as, Caleb and Brown were rolling out a whole new host of features. Online portal is coming out, as well as a few beta programs that I can't talk about openly just yet, but a lot of interesting things occurring in this space. So if you want to talk about Caleb and Brown, reach out to me personally on LinkedIn and we'll have a chat.
Hear all the secrets firsthand.
Yeah.
Very good.
So other than that, it's been good. A few client catch-ups after hours as well, a few dinners. It's a good time. Got my suit fitting done for my wedding, so that was pretty good. Looking pretty amazing, if I don't say myself. But getting excited for that, and so is my fiance. God bless her. And now we're just punting along.
Beautiful.
But if you getting a bit excited as well for the sporting events here in Melbourne right now, it's all coming back to life.
Yeah, what a week. We've got I'm going to the G again today.
Yeah.
Going to see Collingwood, which I can say when I first arrived in Melbourne, Collingwood was kind of the place that I've been
most drawn to,
warned about the most.
Oh right, okay. Yeah. Why just most sketchiest?
More from a footy perspective. I think their fans
They have a reputation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have a reputation. So I'm interested to see what we get today.
Well, it'll be an interesting game. I think it'll be a sellout at the G2. We're here in Richmond right now, which last night when I was leaving the office, it was obviously Melbourne and Brisbane playing. The streets were full. It's good to see footy back on in Melbourne. Yeah.
Yeah. It's it's a pillar of the city, isn't it?
Well, pretty much. But there's not only that going on. We've got rugby coming up next week here as well. You're a big rugby guy, right?
Yeah, gonna go to see the All Blacks play Wallabies at Marvel.
Yeah.
Interested to see how that's gonna go. The All Blacks are in a bit of a decline right now. I think they're like the team within the game that have been at the pinnacle for a long time, and they're kind of having to go through a bit of a rebuild. So, yeah, there's blood in the waters for the Wallabies, I reckon.
Yeah, well, look, I've got no, other than being Australian, I don't really have a dog in the fight in rugby. I hope the Wallabies get up, but just as long as rugby wins and football wins, then I'm happy. It's good for sport. It's good for Melbourne. But there are a few events happening in Melbourne. What about? I think you went to an NFT art event last night, right? Didn't you?
Yeah. So found my way into an event in Rialto, which was an pop-up art gallery. For a spray can artist called Soffles.
Yeah, graffiti artist Soffles. Yeah.
And it was interesting. They had physical versions of all of the paintings there, but they now are releasing an NFT line as well. Yeah. So probably about 60 to 80 people. Really good event. Great little bar, and I think just a good insight to one of the communities that I guess are benefiting from
artists.
From blockchain, from a chance to create digital products. Now, and just exciting to see that actually take place.
Yeah, I actually met Soffles a week ago at a Aussie gallery in Collingwood, your favourite area, and really nice guy. He's got a traditional background in illegal artwork and graffiti, which if you've grown up in Melbourne, I think everyone would be very familiar with that art style, and over my short lifespan, I think it's become well more accepted, not only through people like Soffles, but more famously people like Banksy, who are bona fide, world-renowned artists. Yeah. And their style is graffiti, their style is vandalism. But with all these things, it's to quote Soffles at Aussie Gallery, it was more of a way that he could express himself in a very difficult medium to produce art. And then so far through that, he has been adapting his artwork to NFTs and things like this. But it's a good use case. I think we've spoken about it before on this podcast, and encourage you all to listen to our previous sessions. But it comes back to less about a conversation of crypto and more of a conversation of, well, what is the benefit of Web3? And the Web3 is digital ownership and verifiable copyright, which is the concept that is being explored right now. And I feel like it takes a graffiti artist to delve into a NFT digital space to really show how versatile and adaptable this new technology is for the purpose of delivering products to clients, in this case a digital artwork, protecting copyright and collecting royalties, how efficient it is. And for him it is particularly efficient. Yeah,
it's a structure to just do your business from.
Yeah.
I think in addition to what we spoke about with the ETH merge, you can look at ETH and say, is it going to be successful in the future, or what might its future look like?
Yeah.
And put a lot of weight on the merge. But really it's the utility that I think is coming from these kind of events and these kind of communities that really is going to mean it's successful long term.
Yeah, I agree.
If the ETH merge does fail, let's just say, they don't
they're not successful.
Yeah, they're unsuccessful. They're just going to try again.
Well, I think so. Like, it's not it won't be a nail in the coffin for the project. Like, there is such a significant ecosystem on it. The Ethereum network is worth $200 billion. You know, it's got several 100,000 million users. Several million users, many hundreds of millions, I think. And to say that this will be like the nail in the coffin if it's a do or die is probably not a correct statement. I think it'll set it back if it fails, sure, but it's not something that it can't come back from. The space has come back from worse. But on, you know, for instance, like Soffles, like Ethereum is not the only blockchain in which you can produce NFTs.
Yeah.
I believe Soffles does it on Algorand network.
Oh, right.
So there are many out there.
Yeah.
It's not a one size fits all, and there's not a monopoly at the moment. It's still a growing asset class and many opportunities out there. I've got a client who's building an exchange on the Polygon network, another client who's building one on Solana network for something pretty exciting. Hopefully we can get him on the podcast to talk about it in a few sessions. But you know, there is so much versatility. And each of them have different features, right? Like, you know, if you were to compare Solana and Ethereum is trying to become what Solana currently is, which is a proof of stake consensus mechanism, whereas, you know, we've already spoken about it being proof of work. There's an inherent difference. So yeah, it's a bit of a once you get into the ecosystem, you learn the nuances and you decide what's good for you.
Do you think this idea of interoperability between different blockchains, like, do you think that's are we at a stage yet where they're talking to one another?
Well, yeah, I believe Polygon is one of those layers that is trying to do that, but no, we're probably not at a perfect stage. I think we're competing for land, digital land, pretty much at this stage, like who can become the most prominent blockchain in layer one. That's definitely seems to be the race at the moment, and that race is going to probably be determined who's going to win by which businesses make the most potential value offering in that respect. So like, on a particular layer. So like it's kind of like a hard question to ask right now. We don't know enough, and it's still very early days, but it's exciting nonetheless to see it.
Yeah, big time. Do you think there's any place for Bitcoin in the layer one conversation?
Well, I don't think you can build on the BTC network. I know there are some projects which are trying to build smart contracts upon BTC, but I think as a
payments network.
Well, I'm not sure to the extent of. Well, you can use BTC as payments, but like being in the industry, Bitcoin as a mechanism for transferring value, it's still faster than traditional banks. However, it's slow compared to other blockchains that exist right now. So, and it'll only get slower as it's more widely used because it'll place more strain on the network and things like this. So,
even after Lightning?
Well, yeah, that's a question, but the consensus is that it probably won't be the fastest network, which and also not the most modular as well. So when you have a smart contracts platform that works well on Ethereum or Solana or Cardano, it doesn't make sense to have one on BTC, whereas BTC, as the most decentralized network and the first, its value proposition seems to be, at this stage, to be a, you know, hedge against centralized currencies. Not necessarily an inflation hedge, not necessarily a store of value. That was the old narrative. Like, the new narrative that has popped up is that it hedges against government control, and that's
so much more.
That's a big conversation.
Yeah,
that one. But is there anything in the market right now that you're looking at, particularly interested in, ignoring the Ethereum merge, or?
No, I think just waiting right now. I haven't sold out of any of my positions from that I bought over the last bull market. So I think just waiting, letting the macro kind of hopefully calm down and cool off a little bit.
Yeah, macro is pretty interesting. Very interesting, actually. It seems that if you were to gauge the room and the crypto room in terms of the macro, did you feel that maybe at the start of the year people were still looking at it as an inflation hedge, and that there wasn't strong correlation as opposed to now?
I feel like most people that I spoke to saw it as like a real risk-on investment. I think people that I speak to appreciate the theoretical side of the inflation hedge.
Yeah.
I don't think it's seen as really acting like that yet. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I think like that would be a good TradFi sort of take on things, like risk on. Whereas, you can, like different investment classes, they love the fact that it's decentralized, and are hoping for no regulation because they believe that that's going to lead to more innovation. I don't know if I agree with that. There are many reasons as to why. Probably we'll speak to another one in another podcast, but I think the main thing that I've been seeing is like a lot more people who have been invested in this space have come around to the fact that the macro does have a strong correlation to what this space does. So interest rates and inflation.
But like I was looking at so I just saw an article in The Age recently looking at the property prices in Melbourne this year so far, and they were looking at about 6 suburbs, and essentially they were down between 8 and 12% across all 6.
Yeah.
And I looked at Dublin recently, and essentially it's the same. So the prices right now globally on most significant assets, like it just feels like we're living in a purely globalized economy where we're all dependent on the Fed.
Well, definitely, and like I'm just looking at the Financial Review here Saturday morning, and you go down and look at a few headlines. House price falls won't stop the RBA yet. Like we've just had a significant 0.5 rate rise. For those who don't know, 0.5 rate rises are becoming the norm. They never really were the norm, and they should give you a sign of where the economy is right now. Wartime economics comes to Europe, and unfortunately a bit about Queen Lizzie passing away and Charles becoming king. But it's interesting that like two of those, they're all conversations of change, and we've lived through monumental times of change right now.
Yeah.
But to your point, like we are in a globalized economy, yet we have very centralized currencies, right? And yet what is happening in Dublin is being replicated here in Melbourne and San Francisco and big property markets. Melbourne was mentioned on a recent video I was watching as one of the most significant property markets, along with New York, Singapore, and London. That's the company that Melbourne keeps as a international city. So we're globalized. To me, like being globalized, dependent on the Fed, presents a long-term bullish case for crypto. But to go back to these headlines, we're in a state of change right now.
Why do you think being dependent on the Fed is bullish for crypto?
Because I think they got it wrong, quite frankly. I think governments got it wrong in COVID. Quantitative easing is the monetary policy that has kicked up in prevalence since the GFC. So back when you and I were a little bit less stubble and a bit more wide-eyed. But
I've had this.
You've had the stubble all along. But I definitely think that you've got a strong case for crypto conceptually, because through decentralization, you do not have the political pressure that is exerted over central banks right now as what you did, as what you could have.
Yeah.
So we're living through a time where I guess the central bank conceptually is meant to be removed from government. However, if you look at what America is going through, they're going through midterm elections with the Democratic president who is going to struggle to keep his double house majority right now. He doesn't have a clear majority. and his economic management has not been fantastic since he's come into power.
Or his health.
Or his health. So I think that, the writing is on the wall for him. In order to convince the American people to retain his majority, to make it easier for him to see out his term, he needs to probably see some good signs in the economy, and that's where they start flicking between how they measure what is a recession truly, what is a tight labour market and high inflation good for the economy. There's different opinions that have strayed away from traditional thinking that have come out, and that has an impact to monetary policy. That has an impact to what the Fed does and how they look at it. I was reading the Fed's take on inflation. They don't see the economy really improving, and they're attempting to price in, there's speculation that a 75 bips in interest rate rise in America is going to occur, cash rate rise. But, you have to ask yourself the question are they trying to unwind some bad policy that they assisted in during the course of the pandemic, where they famously printed more money in 2 years than was ever printed in America? I think yes. I think yes. So why is it bullish for crypto? Getting back to the point, because that just doesn't happen in crypto. Just to, there is a very much a laissez-faire attitude to negative things that are occurring in the market. Like, that is the way it is. What do you expect? That seems to be the narrative when Celsius happens or Terra Luna happens. Yeah, it sucks and people lose their money, but the narrative in the market is, you've got to do your own research and buyer beware, which, again, something I don't fully agree with, but point being, they let projects that are going to fail. They don't bail them out. Right?
Yeah.
And so, here we are. And in summary, here we are. We've got high interest rates, high inflation. Things suck from that perspective. And we've also got a new king, so we're going to have to print all our coins again with his face on them.
Yeah, that's
if it were crypto, you could just change the picture.
If it was
Control C, Control V, done.
Yeah, true.
Well, that's
if it was Bitcoin, if there was a decentralized technology that was our monetary system, there would be no Jerome Powell. There would be no one person who was responsible for creating interest rate changes. There would be no king who had their face on the coins. There would just be a technology, in theory, there would be a technology that we adopted and were connected by and paid a tax to no one to use.
But then you kind of have Vitalik through, their prominence within the Ethereum, coming back to Ethereum, who influenced that project and, who are now moving from proof of work to proof of stake, which, again, not to make this podcast about proof of stake, but proof of stake is in theory going to make that currency deflationary. Who function as that through that way? So, will it be a more perfect system? No, but is it evolution that needs to occur for, to unwind a little bit? It really comes down to do you sort of assess that inflation is truly around 10% as they're reporting, knowing that they keep reducing the basket of goods, they take steak out of it. So for those who don't know, inflation calculations have changed over time, particularly the last 30 years. So steak, certain things used to be included in it. Now it's not included, but mincemeat is. So there are, what I'm saying without saying is that there are ways to influence to get a more favourable outcome what the measure of inflation is.
Yeah.
And if inflation was based on an old methodology, 20%, it would be alarming to a lot of people, right? Maybe that is the true inflation if you were to go from an old measure, or maybe not. But the point is that rather than making it an arbitrary calculation, it would be a more programmable calculation, which is what you're saying, and there'd be a great deal more certainty of what is something. So you can make a better solution for it.
It's too much power for a person to have as well.
Well,
I think for Jerome Powell, I know he's held accountable to process, but why do we hand that job over to someone rather than if with technology, a system governed by
I think
a law of technology, rules are more certain.
Well, I think before, we had a potential alternative that was to have like a Jerome Powell and a body of people who were in theory impartial and looked at things objectively to make monetary policy decisions. That was probably your best mechanism to prevent situations like this.
Yeah.
However, not being opinionated or over emotive, I think we've lived through the most in our recent lifetimes. A period of time, because of the pandemic, because of the rise of populism in politics, we've lived through a great deal of misinformation, and populist policies have bled into fiscal policy and monetary policy from our various Western governments to our detriment. And to me, a good alternative that should be thought about and spoken about is the idea of programmable money, so that high inflation doesn't happen again, so that people at home don't have to pay, $10 for a head of cauliflower or lettuce at the supermarket.
Yeah. I saw a clip on social media of a friend of mine who's living in the UK at the moment, and he was putting up the Prime Minister's speech during the week, and in it she was talking about apples, pears and cheese and how England at the moment are importing all of these.
Yeah.
So what the takeaway for me was that there's a move, countries are moving towards a more nationalist policy now at an individual level.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. The UK, if they start doing business with, America, with Australia, they try to start doing more business themselves in-house, it's slowly going to lead to this break away from centralization, I feel, and from like the globalization that we have probably become dependent on.
Well, I think like it's a prisoner's dilemma, and we learned that again through the pandemic. It's all well and good when, a China needs Australia's minerals and for inputs of production, but when they're considering, closing their borders because they don't want spread of COVID, regardless of whether it started there or not, but it disrupts supply chains, it disrupts so much, and the ripple effect is felt everywhere. So I think that thinking is creeping up because, there is the possibility of the unknown, which will cause countries to become reliant again. Again, to keep it local, it's happened here in Australia where a lot of our manufacturing in the early 2010s was, under some poor short-sighted government policy, said, well, if they can't be competitive on a global scale, why do we need it? And the answer was, as we saw the last 2 years, was we need it because not everyone is going to do business with us because there are other concerns and risks presenting to them, not just accepting our money, which is health concerns, and maybe they just can't get it and all these things. So to your point, I think countries have realised that a degree of self-reliance and investment in maybe globally uncompetitive manufacturing and agriculture growing and things like this is a strategic benefit to them. And, in that respect, it probably diverges away from the discussion of blockchain and more but focusing on a similar theme is that how is decentralization of a benefit? If you centralize all your energy production to the Ukraine, the UK is living through this right now, and Europe. War occurs in Ukraine thanks to Russia, and some propaganda that has occurred there where they were told that they would be welcome as liberators if they invade Ukraine. That obviously has not occurred. Causes an energy crisis, which is what Europe will experience right now. These things have wide-reaching consequences, which can we say right now, if it was just us two and given a thing, could we think of all the consequences if we take a decision? Possibly not. But I think it should promote a conversation with minds bigger than ours about what the potential outcomes could be and where they could benefit.
Yeah, agreed. It's it's been a chat that we've digressed from some blockchain topics on into the macro weeds.
Yeah.
But it's definitely fun to, I guess, just to try and think about these things as a thought experiment.
Well, look, this is the conversation of blockchain. This is the conversation of Web3. You know, it's been said a couple of times.
Yeah.
If you're not talking about crypto, you're not talking about finance and the future of finance. And if you're not talking about decentralization, you know, you're probably not talking about a great deal of other things as well. But any parting thoughts, mate, before we wrap this podcast up?
Go Collingwood.
Go Collingwood. Well, on that note, thank you everyone for joining us. Bit of a long one, but I'm Paul.
I'm Owen.
And we're Broken Bullish.
Cheers.